Discussions in this show are for entertainment and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and neither SmartPro Financial nor Bridgeway Wealth are affiliated. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Working Wealth Podcast. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Haley.
And today we are going to talk about homeownership.
Right. That's exactly right.
That's the American dream, right? Was the American dream before, I guess, all the stuff that's now the American dream, which I don't really know what that would be.
Okay.
But growing up for us as younger millennials, do we call ourselves like younger millennials?
I don't really even know what the date range is.
I know there's a term called elder millennials.
Oh,
and
I don't know if we're elder millennials.
I don't think so. I think that's a lot of our friends.
Yeah.
It's like, you're kind of like, hey, you're broken 40 now, that kind of thing. I think that's your elder millennial status.
God, what
these
is
days.
the time frame of millennials?
I know it's not Gen Z, and I'm glad to not be there. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I know we are, but I feel like we're on the last couple of years possibly of it.
Oh, we are. I think it actually transitions around 95. So
okay, we just made the cut.
That's right.
Sort of.
Yeah. We still know what cassette tapes are and 8-track players and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, so today we're going to talk about homeownership. And really the key thing about this is we wanted to take an episode and dive into a lot of the details around what does it take to really buy a house?
Yeah, just something really practical.
Yeah, just thinking about the practicality, especially given like what's been going on in the housing environment, the housing market, if you will.
Right.
Obviously, we know that this time that we're recording this, we're seeing a lot of weird things happening that we haven't seen for a really, really long time. The COVID economy definitely inflated home values substantially over the past couple of years, especially where we live in Greenville, South Carolina.
Right.
I think we could sell our house for twice what we bought it for 6 years ago, which is kind of crazy to think about. But a common thing we talk about with clients is, if you sell in this market, you're also going to be buying in this market.
Yes.
So it's not just about...
people tend to forget that.
They do, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Because I hear people all the time, oh my gosh, I can get XYZ for my house.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, where are you going to live?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I guess I have to buy something then.
Yeah.
Right.
You want to sell your house and make $400,000? Well, you're probably going to buy for $1 million.
Right.
So it's
you just kind of like...
It's a very real thing.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. So thinking about that, there's some key topics we want to address in terms of, what does it take to actually, afford buying a house, or what makes good financial sense when you're trying to buy a house.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to disappoint a lot of people when we say this, and I'm okay with that because my goal is helping people make good financial decisions, not getting into a bind.
We'll also probably share some funny stories of what happened to us when we bought a house.
We will. It's funny now. It wasn't funny in the moment.
Then.
But it's definitely funny now.
Yeah.
I would say it worked out in some ways positively. And then really talking about what we'll call like after the close. Like what are key things you need to be aware of after you close on your house, whether it's your first house or it's not your first house and you moved 17 times before. What are some of the key financial things to be aware of? Because we find a lot of times in client conversations, there's some very critical things that the loan officer, the real estate agent, the tax office, all that, they don't communicate well to people that are buying a house.
Right. And I think that most people just think, I need to have a down payment. Yes, and more.
Yeah, a lot more.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot more, especially in today's market. So, but before we jump in, let's get a word from our sponsors. We don't actually have sponsors, but we both just had a Scouts donut. So shout out to JP and Ryland Rainsford of Scouts Donuts. We love what you've done with the business.
I was like, I don't know who the sponsor is. I should have their Scouts mug.
I know. We should have done that. We should have thought ahead about it.
Go see our friends, JP and Ryland, Scouts Donuts.
Over on East North Street in Greenville, South Carolina.
It will not disappoint. They also now serve coffee.
Yep.
What better than coffee and donuts?
Oh, yeah.
Be lovely.
Yeah. And delicious donuts at that.
Yes, and JP and Ryland, I was not anticipating us shouting you out, so sorry.
But we're going to anyway. So hope that helps, guys. But anyway, so talking about homeownership, a few things that are really, really important is just in general, I would say affordability. Let's talk about what that actually means. We do think that as part of your financial journey, it is definitely a positive thing to own a home and own real estate as part of your life. That's not saying that everybody needs to own a home. Everybody does need quality housing. Like that is definitely a basic thing everybody should have. But when we think about buying a house, we need to make sure that we're actually making a good financial decision because we have a lot of history starting to show right now in the past 18 months, but especially over the past 20, 25 years, a tremendous amount of case studies where people have made really stretching financial decisions that have put them in a worse spot when things go wrong. And we don't want to find anybody in that situation. We want everyone to make a good financial move and ultimately like be happy with the purchase. This is one of the largest purchases you're ever going to make in your house in your life. You should be satisfied, at a minimum, satisfied. Ideally elated about the purchase you make.
Your home is supposed to be a place of like comfort and safety and warmth, not a place of contention and stress and financial ruin.
Yeah, you don't want that to be like the anchor that drags you down from being able to do other things.
Yeah, because you will grow unhappy with it and you will leave.
Yeah. And typically that means we're making an emotional decision rather than a proactive or like logical decision.
Yeah.
And typically emotional decisions with money that does not turn out very well for a lot of people. So thinking about some general rules of affordability for a house.
Yeah.
In my mind, this really starts with what are we doing to prepare ourselves for home ownership? So I'm going to turn the tables and ask Haley.
Okay.
When you think about preparing for home ownership, what are some of the key things that you want to see someone have in place or that you felt like was good that we had in place when we bought our first home?
The comfortability of how much per month we're willing to spend on our dwelling.
Okay.
And then being on the same page of what price range we're looking in.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I don't know. I feel like you start putting too many contentions on it, and then I don't know. What else? Am I missing anything? What are you thinking?
Yeah. So
I mean, I'm thinking general. Like, I'm not getting real specific with my
let's go
answer.
specific. Let's go specific. So, like, when you think about, like, what does it mean to be affordable? Like, having an idea of, how much we can spend or what our price range is.
Okay.
A lot of that goes back to knowing our numbers.
Well, yeah.
Right?
I mean, yeah, and that's why I said knowing, like, what we feel comfortable spending on a mortgage on a monthly basis.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's it. And then also for me, I guess when I looked at a house, it was, hey, this isn't exactly what I want my home to look like, but it is 100% satisfactory for me to move in and live here and slowly make it mine over time.
Yeah.
So just that's kind of what I looked at. It's affordable, like things can stay the way they are. It's not going to take $100,000 extra upon moving in to make this work for us.
Right. Yeah. And that's a really good point, is not everything is going to be perfect when we first make that purchase.
Even if you build it yourself, you will find things. Oh, I should have done this.
Wish that wall was 3 inches to the right.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. Yeah, which you can fix anything with enough money, but you don't want to find yourself in that situation of having to go back and play construction worker or project manager to fix stuff. But thinking about that affordability, right? For me, I would say the best things we got to make sure we have in place, just bare bones, is understanding how much we can spend.
Yeah.
And I'll take what you said around like what are we comfortable spending and actually put an assignment to that.
Okay.
In general, when we think about making that purchase, we don't want our living or like our dwelling expenses to be more than 25% of our take-home income. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which we could run the math, we could do all the case studies and talk about that.
Do you think a lot of people offend that rule?
Most people do.
I was sitting here going,
yeah, most people do. Whether it's a house or even if it's an apartment or a house you're renting, I think a lot of people do that these days. Yeah, and that puts us in a tough spot. And the reason why I say that and why I'm really hard on that 25% rule is 25% of our take-home income. That leaves 75% for everything else. That means
okay. I have a really a random question for you.
Go for it.
Do you think in today's market, and just let's talk about Greenville, South Carolina, with the prices of homes. I mean, we've been talking about this as a constant conversation at our house. Do you think it is still realistic for someone to follow that rule?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. I really do. Because it's not about making a emotional feel-good decision. It's about making a good financial decision. Okay. And a lot of times, especially in our culture today, people opt for making the decision that makes them feel good to try to satisfy or alleviate some kind of pressure point in their life elsewhere and ultimately make a bad financial decision. So, and this is why I want to talk about like what to do to prepare before we even get into actual home ownership, right? Like what should we do to prepare for the possibility of owning a home to make sure once we get into home ownership, we're not in a bad spot.
Okay.
And that goes back to like how much are we spending per month. So there's a lot of things that do affect that 25% number, right? Mm-hmm. We have obviously our income. So if we are not in a position where the homes in our area or the type of home, the price point we're looking for makes sense, the things we can influence there is increase our income, right? And I would say we're starting to see some changes in terms of the employment environment where maybe getting that 3 separate work from home jobs for $150,000 each all at the same time is not realistic anymore. But if you're continually working on your career path and working to improve your skills and show your value to your company, your organization, your clients, et cetera, that's how we can increase that income at a faster pace.
Okay.
If we can't do that, the next thing is we can put more money down to buy a house. So that's talking about that down payment piece. The more that you actually put down as a down payment, the less you're going to be financing over the term of the mortgage, and that's going to ultimately reduce your total payment cost. Mm-hmm. The next thing that I would say outside of down payment is try to get a better interest rate. And this is one where it leads to a lot of conversation and a lot of conflicting viewpoints, we'll call them, online around how should we use credit. Or should we use credit at all? Do you need a credit score? How good should your credit score be? Like all those kind of questions.
Yeah.
In short, I would say we need to make sure we have good payment history to our name. That's really what it means. You don't actually need a credit score to buy a house to get approved for a mortgage. And anybody who says you do, they're trying to sell you debt that you probably don't need.
That they're lying, as I used to do this for a living.
Yeah. Right. And that's why we're going to be a little more passionate about that is you don't need a credit score because you can always go through manual underwriting. And that's the way that they used to actually qualify people for mortgages back before the credit score really became a thing and companies started manufacturing debt and selling debt to people for consumer purposes. Right. So that's the third thing, right? So increase your income. You can put a bigger down payment down. Okay. You can get a better rate on your loan, and that's by shopping around different mortgage companies, brokerages, things like that. And then the next one is just based on that actual price point, making sure that we're by putting enough down and by making a good purchase decision on the total amount of house we're buying, is trying to keep our escrow amounts down as much as possible.
Right.
And if you're not familiar with that, or for anybody who doesn't know what escrow is, when you buy a house, you're not just paying for the loan to buy the house on a monthly basis.
It's not just principal and interest.
Yeah, it's not just the principal and interest. There's also other things that can get added in. You have your regular homeowner's insurance, which is an annual fee that gets broken down into a monthly amount added onto your mortgage cost. You have your property taxes, which in most states is going to be part of escrow. That's going to be whatever that property tax assessment is, broken up on a monthly basis. Yeah. And then going back to depending on how much you actually put down, you can have something called private mortgage insurance, which might be the top 5 scams in our financial industry. Because private mortgage insurance is not actually to protect the borrower, it's to protect the mortgage companies from borrowers defaulting on their loans.
Yes.
But you can get out of that by making sure you put down 20%. Or there are certain programs where you're close to that. You can prepay additional money at closing and actually get out of that mortgage insurance for the life of the loan.
Yep. Or when you hit the loan to value of 80 to 20, PMI, private mortgage insurance, comes off.
Can come off.
Can come off. You can also apply for it to come off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because they don't automatically necessarily take it off. That's going to depend on who your loan servicer is and the loan program specifically.
And there are ways to get that removed at a quicker pace than just like paying down so much of your original loan. We have a lot of clients that we've helped in the past few years that because their home value has gone up so much, their technical equity or the amount of value they have versus the total home cost has actually put them at a point where they're no longer below that 80-20 threshold.
Right.
And that's a good way to get rid of like an extra $40 or $50 a month expense in terms of mortgage insurance without having to really do anything, not having to put any more money down except maybe paying for an appraisal. But overall, that can save people a lot of money.
Right.
With that. But going back to that affordability piece, right? Thinking about even just that 25% number that I threw out there, to me, that's so critical because we need to make sure we have enough discretionary funds in our budget on a monthly basis that we can actually, give. We can pay for food. We can pay for transportation costs. If we are still paying off consumer debt, pay that off at a faster pace, and really just live our lives. But if we get to the point where our housing cost is 35, 40, 45, God forbid, 50% of our bring home income, you have no margin. Like there's no room to be able to do anything successful or proactive financially.
Yeah, especially for the long term.
Right. And all it takes is one bad move or one bad experience to really throw things off.
That's right.
And put you in a worse financial position because you decided to buy a house.
Yeah.
And we don't want to see anybody go through that.
Yeah. So you have affordability. So you're talking about that monthly, but what are some things that people need to be thinking of down payment wise or cash on hand? What do you suggest for that? I mean, I know, down payment is going to be something that you have to work with a loan officer to figure out which loan program you're going to go with to then dictate whether you're doing 20%, 15, 10, 5, or 3.5% if you're doing an FHA loan.
Yeah, so I think this all still connects with that affordability piece, which is deciding how much we can afford, how much we can actually purchase based on our needs, not our wants, but based on our needs, right? And really for that is the down payment is very controversial. A lot of folks, a lot of talking heads, financial experts, they say put down 20%. I would agree. If you can put down 20%, we need to do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to put down 20%, though, to be able to buy a house. And there are a lot of different loan programs that allow you to get away without doing it. There's even 0% down, like USDA or VA.
That's right.
Don't recommend those for anybody for the most part because you're starting out basically underwater on your loan.
Right.
But there are those options out there. In general, what I would say is for the most part, we need to be putting down at least 10% as a down payment to buy a house. So if you're buying a $300,000 house, you need to have $30,000 set aside to put as a down payment. But you alluded earlier, that's not all that goes into that actual purchase. Because when you buy the house, there's other things that get added on like closing costs.
There's other people who need to get paid.
There's other people that want to get paid.
Right.
And the system is set up to make sure they get paid, I'll say.
Yes. Your loan company has fees.
Yeah.
So that's another give or take $1,000 to $2,000. Then on top of that, you've got an appraisal, which is which used to be around
probably
the
$500 to
$550
$600
range. And then there's other things like the attorney fees, the title search, making sure you have a clear and free title before you close. And of course, they also have their fees and document fees and things like that. So at the end of the day, it will be more than just that $30,000 for your $300,000 house. And I do think that is surprising. Yes, there are situations where you can roll some of that up into the loan, but that's very specific with who you're working with and what company you're working with and the type of loan, not trying to get super specific and say that because, there's many mortgage companies. They're all going to have different things, just like each company can also figure out what their floor for a credit score is. Like some companies will take it to the mat a little bit more than others. So it's just going to depend on where you end up there. But if you're having to roll the closing costs into the loan, like is this the best idea?
Yeah, and I'm going to say it's not.
And I don't know.
Right?
And I'm not an advisor, but
Right.
you know.
Well, and there's a lot of creative things that real estate agents are working through and helping clients actually successfully do these days,
Okay.
which is, in terms of getting some of the closing costs paid for. Historically speaking, up
Yes.
until the big multi-billion-dollar settlement with NAR over the past couple months, there's been a lot of standards in the industry around commissions and fees and things like that. I do think I do think it's beneficial to work with a qualified real estate agent to process or set up a transaction to make sure everybody wins a little bit and loses a little bit. That's a good compromise overall.
Right.
But a lot of really good agents are doing things like negotiating seller credits as part of the purchase contract, where out of the seller's proceeds, if they're making a profit, they'll pay for part of the closing costs, or they'll give you, some cash back at closing to cover your closing costs. Because some of the costs you can't actually roll into your loan. You can't finance that.
Right.
But there's a lot of different creative ways to do that. Long and short of those, we need to understand that it's not just the down payment; it's the down payment plus closing costs, which I've seen a lot of closing disclosures recently that can be upwards of $25,000, $30,000, depending on the size of the loan, the size of the property you're actually paying for.
Okay.
So it's always good, again, to work with a qualified real estate agent who has the experience of negotiating good contracts to figure all that out.
Yes.
But we don't want to find ourselves in a situation of overstepping our financial bounds because we get stuck on like that emotional piece of what we're trying to buy overall.
Yes.
But thinking again about that affordability piece, so 25% of our net or take-home income really needs to be that maximum threshold for what our housing cost is going to be. And in addition to that is to get to that point where we can actually afford that 25%, a lot of times what we need to do is focus on paying off debt first. So if we have credit cards, if we have car loans, if we have other personal debt, personal loans, even medical bills that are 0% interest, getting as much off your plate as possible before you go into the purchase of a home with several $100,000s of mortgage debt is going to be important to ensure you have that margin to actually live successfully.
Absolutely.
But
well, not only to live successfully, but also to qualify for the loan that you want.
Right. That's a big factor. Your debt to income ratio is one of the biggest factors, along with your credit score, your credit history, I'll say.
It definitely is important
to get that loan.
Yeah.
But thinking about that as
we have, don't go buy a new car. Don't be a bonehead. Don't be a bonehead.
Yeah. Don't take out any debt. Just don't do that after you get under contract on a house. That's a really, really bad decision.
People are like, oh yeah, nice shiny new car with my new house. No, you don't.
Yeah.
Just wait.
That's the worst decision you can make.
Please stop.
You're going to piss off your agent, your seller,
Ready? This is
everyone
Haley being
involved.
honest. You look dumb, and everybody knows it.
Yeah. So what I would say is, in addition to that 25% mark and paying off consumer debt, we need to make sure we have the down payment and closing costs saved. And it's not about just having those saved and draining your accounts to be able to buy that house. You also need to be planning for emergencies because emergencies do happen. Great example of that is we bought our first house back in 2018.
May of 2018.
May of 2018. Right. It was about 6 months later.
Yeah.
We were going to bed, or we had just gone to bed, and a storm was coming through. Haley was sleeping like a log, or like a rock. I don't know what the phrase is there. And all of a sudden, a tree falls on our house.
And I was still asleep.
And Haley slept through the entire thing. but the reason I bring that up is because we see a lot of times that, like, you get into a house, inspections can't catch everything. There's always some kind of repair that happens.
Haley, what do we do? I said, I don't know. This is my first tree sitting on a house situation.
Right. I remember that. It was, that was a very interesting situation. But the key with that is you have to be prepared for the unthinkable. And that's just about really having good financial sense in general, not just about buying a house.
It sets you up for when a second tree falls on your house.
Which also does happen, by the way. 4 years later, that does happen. But thinking about that, we have to make sure we have emergency savings in place. And those emergency savings have to be enough that are actually going to help us cover any kind of catastrophic situation that does come up. We always recommend 3 to 6 months of living expenses being part of that emergency fund. That 3 to 6 month number can vary based on how many incomes you have, the type of income, stability of your jobs,
Yeah, and
all
like
those things.
an appropriate use of a emergency fund would not be a down payment
Correct. That's actually one of the dumbest things you can do. Yeah,
because you're going to need it
exactly.
when you own the home.
Right.
Because your pipe's going to burst.
Yeah.
Your microwave's going to go out.
That happens. Yep.
Yep. I'm not speaking from experience.
Yeah, it's all about just being prepared, because again, the last thing we want to do is you enter into this massive investment,
Yeah.
and you find yourself always chasing your tail to try to catch up, chasing your tail to try to make up for bad things that do happen, and they do happen. Like stuff comes up, and it can be pretty catastrophic if we're not well prepared for that.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what happens after you own the home for a year and taxes are reassessed, and how that affects escrow, and how it pretty much catches everyone by surprise? Like whenever I hear someone going on about a shortage of escrow or something, I'm like, have you owned your home for about a year? Yes. I'm like,
Yeah.
I hear several people talking about this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of factors that affect this. So just to recap, we talked a little bit ago about the escrow component of a mortgage payment. It's technically an add-on on top of your principal and interest payments.
Yeah.
The escrow is taking your total amount of money owed for property taxes on the house or the property plus your annual insurance cost and dividing that up by 12. The challenge or what happens with that is kind of twofold, really threefold, I would say. First and foremost, when you buy a house, if it's your primary residence, you have to make sure you register that as your primary residence with your tax office.
That's such a great point. Yes,
Yeah.
because then you're assessed on 3%, right?
I believe it's 4%.
4%?
South Carolina. Yeah,
Is it 4 instead of
4%.
6,
correct.
which is non-legal residence, which is like
Investment
a vacation
property.
home,
Yeah.
an investment property. Yeah. Okay. Is it
Yeah,
4?
and so the reason why that's critical is because when you first buy that house, you're going to get a little letter in the mail, or at least here in South Carolina.
I think it's pink.
It's a little pink envelope is what it is.
And a lot of people think it's trash. And I
Yeah.
totally understand, because you're going to get a lot of things in the mail after you buy a house that's like some kind of insurance ploys, or
Yeah, mortgage
homeowners
insurance.
life insurance,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But this is from your county tax office, and it's very important to fill out and complete. Yes, I know some people who've accidentally thrown that away.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the reason why that's important is because it does have an impact on how much your property taxes are. And you can always go
It
back
makes
if
a big
you
difference.
if you miss it, you can go back and
Yeah.
amend and appeal it and try to get some of
Absolutely.
that money back. But it's just a headache, and nobody has time to waste on that. So really thinking about like after the close, after you
Yep.
close on the house, you're in the house.
Okay.
We got to make sure we look for that tax notice to ensure we claim that this house is a primary residence, and we want the
Right.
preferred tax rate
Yes,
on that
of course
property.
we do. Yeah.
We do need to make sure we avoid all that extra fluff mail that you're going to get, like, mortgage, life insurance, and all that kind of stuff. All that's a waste. Focus on building good.
You will,
good,
if you buy a house with a fireplace, you will have a lot of kindling for a long time.
That's right. Yeah, you will. A lot of fire started there.
Yeah.
But with that, so we need to make sure we do the tax assessment. The second thing about that is when you actually enter into the contract or you go to closing, part of your closing costs are going to be what we call prepaid insurance premiums and prepaid taxes. It's really prepaid escrow, but it's basically you're putting money in that escrow account to prepay what's needed for your tax and insurance bill that'll come up within the next 12 months.
Right.
And especially in an environment we've had over the past couple of years where home values have increased so much, if you bought a house today for $800,000
Okay.
and the last person or the person selling it bought that house for $500,000 2.5 years ago,
Yeah.
all the estimates for homeowners insurance costs and for your tax cost are going to be based off of the records for that prior owner, specifically the tax side. If you do your homework and you're really diligent about the side on insurance, you can get that more accurate.
Right.
But the tax piece is going to be really critical, because if they bought that house for $500,000,
It's assessed at that. Yeah.
it's assessed at that, or it's assessed based on that for the formulas for their accounting.
Correct.
But if you buy it at $800,000, the next year when they actually reassess the taxes, your tax rate is going to increase substantially to match that new purchase price and that transaction value.
Correct.
So what happens for a lot of people is you'll close on the house and you will put in your prepaid escrow, and then your monthly payment, which again we talked about, we want to keep that below 25% of our net income.
Correct.
Your monthly payment, maybe it's right at the threshold. If you're following the rules, it's right at the threshold. And you get a few months down the road, you've prepaid in that escrow, and let's say the year turns over. Now it's January,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you get a letter saying you have an escrow shortage,
Yes.
and you owe this much money to catch up on your escrow,
And it's a chunk.
and it's usually a couple $1,000s.
Yeah, it's a chunk.
And or you can pay an additional $300 or $400 a month on your mortgage to make it up over the next 12 months, and that catches a lot of people by surprise, especially
It does.
if
Yeah.
especially and rightfully so.
Well,
by the way.
yeah, because, well, it feels like a bait and switch.
It does.
And that's why it freaks people out.
Right.
Because, don't mess with my home. And I totally understand it.
Right. And God forbid you bought the house 5 months ago and you've had a slew of issues with it in those past 5 months.
Right.
That
It
we
just
weren't
feels
prepared
like
for.
you're getting kicked.
It's that constant,
Yeah.
constant anchor that's just dragging you down financially,
Right.
draining you emotionally, all that kind of
yeah.
stuff. But what I would say the problem there is you have a couple of options. Is you can make like a lump sum payment to catch up on the escrow, or you can just let it cycle out by having the increased monthly payment.
Right.
But what is that going to do to the rest of your financial life? If you were already overextended on your payment, like say you're at 35% or 40% of your net income,
Yeah. That couple
now you're at 50 or
$100 is
55, that next year is going to be really, really rough.
really- yeah.
And it'll resolve itself after 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Do you think this is something that people should definitely be expecting?
I think they should.
I mean, I remember ours
But-
got assessed and it went up.
Yeah.
And it didn't go up substantially.
It was
but,
$150 or so. Yeah.
and we chose to just pay the lump sum, I'm pretty sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that you should expect it, but you can't expect it if you don't know about it. And that's why we're talking about it today, to make sure there's some knowledge base.
I just don't think that most people buy and sell enough houses to know about it.
Or it's so far apart
Or
they forget
so
about
far
it.
you forget
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things that we're working on right now with a lot of our centers of influence that are real estate agents and
Yeah.
mortgage loan officers, is sharing, hey, like, you guys probably don't see this on the back end after your clients buy the house because they don't think to tell you about it. But as financial planners, like me as a financial planner,
we
I
hear
hear
about
about
it.
this all the time,
Yeah.
because what that does is if somebody's escrow shortage equals $500 a month, and say they were funding their retirement accounts, well, now what are they going to do? They're going to shortchange their future by stopping their retirement planning and making sure that they have to cover their mortgage, right? Or even worse is they'll keep doing all that and then just go into debt for buying food and buying clothes and buying gas and all that kind of stuff. And that's not a win. Like that's not a successful solution over time. So we're trying to actually help our
What a
centers of
delicate
influence be more
balancing act.
proactive.
You know what I'm saying? It
Mm-hmm.
just, everything is such a balance.
It is.
When you overextend in one area, you probably lose sight of all of the other things.
Mm-hmm.
When you say a hard yes to maybe extending yourself in one area, there's so many little no's
Mm-hmm.
that you've said that you may never know you said no to.
Right. And that goes back to making an emotional, quick decision, something that alleviates that short-term pain we talked about, not realizing the long-term impact that's going to have. And that's why, again, every client conversation we start with, hey, how's your income? What's changed? What's the impact on cash flow for the decisions that we've made over the past few months or past year?
Yeah.
And this is really critical, and it's really I would say it's personal, right? Because it's your home. And I realize that some of the things we say and some of the opinions we might have around making this financial decision are going to be polarizing for people. But I really think that if you can't afford it, you need to wait. It's not bad to rent. You're not wasting money. You're setting yourself up for better long-term success in a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons. Now, every person's situation is different. And there are a lot of loan products that are out there to even get down payment assistance and all those kind of things. But we don't want anybody to be having
There is a lot.
we don't want anyone to be in a situation where you're feeling like you're having to force the issue to get it done. If you're having to do that, maybe that means we've got to stop and pause and take a step back before we make a potentially catastrophic decision for our financial life for the long term.
Yeah.
Because I can promise you this too, and I see this a lot on the retired or like retirement transition clients we work with, is you might have a net worth, we've talked about this, that's $1.5 to $2.5 million.
Okay.
But maybe $1 million or $1.5 million of that is tied up in your property. You're not going to be able to retire successfully unless your spending is extremely low. And the problem is people look at their house as an investment.
Oh, you mean like people are, because you're counting someone's primary residence in their net worth.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to have that money, you got to leave it. First of all, you have to find someone willing to buy it for that. Which my opinion of homes over $1 million. If I had $1 million, I'd just go build my own home, not build the home you thought was amazing. I'm not going to buy it. Well, then you've got nothing, right? Because you can't access it.
Well, and that's the point I was going to make is that,
Sorry, I did
your
cut
home
you
is
off.
not an investment for investment's sake. It's a lifestyle investment.
Right.
It's not something that we want to have to liquefy down the road to turn into assets we can then live off of to support our income needs and our cash flow needs in the future, especially for retirement. So thinking about that, we've talked about a lot of different things so far.
Yeah. And this is such a hot button topic, and it really is around our house right now, as well as we are trying to figure out if we're going to stay in the home that we bought that I never imagined being a forever home, or if we're going to try and build a home, which prices for that are kind of daunting to think about.
Yep.
So
exorbitant.
we're right there with you guys. Like if you're having these conversations at home, so are the Rogers. We talk through it too. It's not like we are immune to what our feelings are either when it comes to making decisions. So we are also doing that with right alongside you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So just a few other things that I think are really important is we talked about taxes and insurance. Well, really on insurance, one thing that I would say is critical that we've seen for a lot of people that maybe they're not buying a house, but they have a house they bought several years ago or even more, is we need to make sure we're constantly updating or improving our insurance coverage amounts. So on your homeowner's policy, there's different coverage amounts you have. The primary one being your dwelling coverage. That is like how much money is the insurance company willing to put out to replace or repair your house if you have to file a claim. And where a lot of people have a miss is if you don't have enough coverage to equate to at least 80% of your home's replacement, like full replacement value, and you file a claim, the insurance company is not going to pay out to fully cover that claim. And that's across the board. Yeah. So a lot of carriers, they do have inflation clauses or like indexing clauses to keep up with the inflation of your home value in your area.
But if you do something major to it, like you do a remodel or you add a deck or you do an addition, the insurance company would probably not have would not know unless you reach back out to the agent to get it assessed.
Exactly. And that's why we got to make sure we're being proactive about that.
Interesting.
And again,
that makes perfect sense. I just know that's probably something that just flies right by someone because, I wouldn't have really thought about it too much either.
It's all about being diligent and tracking your numbers and
I also
being proactive.
wrote down moving costs. Because some people are legit moving long distance, and the cost of renting something to haul their stuff. I just thought that's another thing to think about.
Yeah, and ideally would be paying for that cash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Although you can, and this is where like a lot of things in our society today is everyone offers financing. So I've seen that a lot with movers and other services and things. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. But I have heard that it can be very expensive. So in my mind, a few months ago when I thought we were going to build a home and we were going to move, I was like, I'm going to have someone come in here. I'm going to have someone wrap everything up, box everything up. Then I heard someone say the quote they got, and I said, looks like Haley Rogers Movers is coming to town.
Yeah, especially for a short distance. We're not
but I was just dreaming.
No, I've heard of moving costs upwards of $100,000.
Huh?
Yeah.
Haley Rogers.
Yeah. So that's the thing where
Moving
we're going to make
company.
sure we're being diligent about that too. So it's not just the cost of like actually buying the house, right? If you're buying a $500,000 house, it's not $500,000. It's or whatever your down payment is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to be all that plus, all that with moving costs, all that with we realize this couch doesn't fit through the doorway. What are we going to do? Like, there's a lot more things than
gosh,
just
yes.
the money you're told you have to bring as a down payment
I
to actually
know.
close and buy that property. But we could definitely talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
There's so many different scenarios. I have a lot of case studies we've talked to people about over the years.
Well, this is a fun topic too.
It is, and I think we could spend a lot of time diving into some wild stories with it too. But really, to wrap up for here today, as people are thinking about moving, really my best advice is, or not just moving, but buying a house, is find a qualified professional. Like, talk with someone who's not just incentivized by selling you a loan or selling you the house or helping you sell your house.
We
Like,
rely on expert
work with your
advice.
financial professional. Talk through the specifics, the numbers, the details, all the kind of stuff that can happen and can go wrong, and make sure we're prepared. The last thing you want to do is be unprepared, and because of your lack of planning, you now have an emergency that's going to throw you off your track for the long term.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that was great. That was super fun. I enjoyed that topic.
Yeah, that was good. All right. Well, if you guys have any feedback or any questions, comments, please let us know. We would love to get your feedback on any kind of topics we can also work on going forward. But thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Discussions in this show are for entertainment and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and neither SmartPro Financial nor Bridgeway Wealth are affiliated.